For my dogs, Georgia football recap show. It's a working title. The name of the show is a working title. Zach is back. Obviously we had a lot of fun with the UNC show, and I'm really excited and pumped about UNC basketball, also UNC football. But this is all about the dogs, baby. And you got me into this going on 20 years ago, and it has not been the easiest of pulls, but recently, the last 5, 6 years, 7 years has been unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a dog. As you know, my history with Georgia football goes back to birth. My grandfather played for Georgia in the 40s. Big John Talitsky played fullback in the Orange Bowl.
Big John, back when the fullback was, that was it. There's very few fullbacks out there nowadays, but yeah, Big John, baby.
And then my dad played briefly in the early 70s. And so I've been going to Georgia games as far back as I can remember. As far as I know, my first game was 1979, Georgia-Auburn. Jeff Pyburn, I think, was the starting quarterback, if memory serves.
Okay.
And then, of course, in 80, I was 7, 8 years old. And so to have that season with Herschel and I was at the game, the Sugar Bowl. But then, 40-year drought was tough. And, I think for that entire 40 years, it sort of felt like we were a sleeping giant. And although we had our moments, we had all of our rivals winning national championships and having, their time in the sun. And very, very frustrating, I think, to be a Georgia fan with all the talent in the state, the fan base, all of the advantages we have. And then to have Kirby, come home, as an alum and do what he's doing. It's just an awesome time to be a fan. So it'll be fun to talk about. I think it's going to be a fun season. A lot of changes in college football that we can talk about. It's a dynamic landscape. We'll sort of all figure it out together over the course of the season, but off to a great start with what we put on Clemson yesterday.
Yeah, man, Woodshed. Georgia takes Clemson to the Woodshed down in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz. I think Dabo Swinney, and again, there's a lot to unpack with Clemson, and it doesn't get any easier for Clemson after that. I mean, they got Appalachian State next week, so that might be 0-2 for you. The Mountaineers might roll in there.
Hey, stranger things have happened. I mean, App's going to bring it, and you don't know what kind of emotional letdown Clemson's going to have. So, that could be a danger zone.
Yeah, 34-3, man, 34-3. A little sluggish start, but first game of the year, you would expect that. And then, man, the second half just unreal. A lot of things led to it. I'm new to it now. Again, my backstory with Georgia football is Zach is my brother, one of my closest friends in the world. Just to connect and be a little bit more closer to him, because I didn't have really a big college football team. I started pulling for Georgia when Zach married into our family. Then half my friends, because I'm from North Carolina and I work in country music, are all Georgia Bulldog fans. So hopefully we can get some of these guys on. I know Kip Moore is a big Georgia Bulldog fan. I exchanged messages with Travis Denning yesterday, with Kane Brown. I know those are terrible name drops, so I apologize. But like half of country music is either Tennessee Volunteers or Georgia Bulldog. So it's been a lot of fun. It's helped me make a lot of friends. I've adopted it. I've kind of married into the family, I guess, of the Georgia football fan base, and it is awesome. And it's been a great run over the last half decade. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good family to be in, especially these days.
Yeah, very. I mean, it wasn't always that way. I was always like, man, we shouldn't just pick Alabama? That seems like a fun fan base, but we stuck to Georgia. I give you all the credit in the world. I got a chance to go to the all-state, national title game kickoff dinner and did like the whole red carpet thing with Georgia as a Georgia fan. And I got to mention you. I don't know if you ever saw that video of how I got to be a Georgia fan. The guy was kind of making fun of me for rolling with the dogs. And I was like, wait a minute, I got 2 decades in this now. I think I'm okay. I don't
that's a reasonable commitment.
Yeah, 2 decades. Come on. But 34-3, man. How you feeling? You got to be feeling great after that second half.
Yeah. I mean, you have to feel great as a Georgia fan. just the state of the program, to go into that game. Well, I think we were 13 and a half point favorites. And I'm not really a big sports bettor, so I wasn't following that line that closely, but a couple people brought it up to me on Friday at work. And, my gut reaction from, 45 years plus, of watching Georgia football is like, that's a crazy line. Like a season opener in a neutral game against Clemson, for it to be 13 and a half. All of my life history would say that's a crazy line.
A lot of people were taking that bet.
And Kirby makes a lot of friends out in Vegas because, he's like 90% plus or something against the line over the last several years. And of course, we covered easily. So just the fact that that's the line on a season opener against Clemson, who I know they've had their struggles in the last couple of years, but still, over, the last 8 to 10 years is a top 5 program in the country.
Sure.
So, that just tells you the state of the program that, that's almost like a ho-hum opener, 34-3, felt kind of workmanlike, but, you sort of zoom out and take a broader view. That's a beatdown of sort of epic proportions against a rival program.
Clemson's what, 14th in the country?
Yeah, 14th in the country. Yeah, still probably top 10, team in the country talent-wise, just in terms of, pros on that team. But I want to get into that too, just the talent discrepancy between the two programs at some point on the call, because I think there's some interesting stuff going on. Not only between Georgia and Clemson, but just between the halves and the close halves in college football, because I think that gap is bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah. Also interesting year to start this just because the college playoff system, and, hopefully Georgia ends up, and I think I heard on the broadcast where the SEC title game is going to be back in the Mercedes-Benz Arena. And then I think maybe the Final Four game is going to be back there. So Georgia has done well there. Some crazy stat, and again, don't quote me, but I think that Clemson only ran 1 or 2 plays in enemy territory until midway or like 10 minutes left in the third quarter. Like the defense yesterday seemed as if it was just a dominant performance. Now you look at the box score and, you hold them to 3 and you hold Clemson to 3 on a neutral field. You can say, okay, they dominated them. But it's even worse than that. They controlled the ball. They controlled the field. It was unreal. Klubnik, I know, is unproven, but he throws for less than 150 and one of the most unbelievable interceptions. I wouldn't even put that on Cade Klubnik, that interception that kid had. He's going to be first-team All-American. The defense for Georgia was unreal yesterday, just flying around the field. Incredible.
Yeah, I think 46 yards rushing, 2 yards per attempt. That's pretty dominant. And if Georgia can make, they've been doing this really since Kirby got there. They make the other team one-dimensional by suffocating the run, and then they have so many athletes in the back end. So when they know you're going to pass, right, they can pin their ears back and come, and they're going to get turnovers on the back end, and so. That's what they were able to do. And, you're not going to beat them rushing, getting 46 yards rushing.
No. You're not going to beat a lot of people getting
it. Yeah.
But you're definitely not going to beat Georgia.
Yeah. And I know Clemson had a little bit of a rough start to the year last year, but I think they won the last 4 or 5 games. Klubnik was, a top recruit, one of the top couple of quarterbacks in the country. And I get he's a little unproven, but he's also an experienced returning guy.
Yeah.
The running back is solid. And so, I think that's a good barometer for this defense. I'm not saying that Clemson's the best offense we're going to play all year, but certainly to do that against that quality of an opponent is right out of the box is incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to echo anyone that watched the game. I'm going to echo something that's, I guess, fairly obvious. The skill positions at Georgia, like not that it goes without saying, incredible. Tons of speed everywhere. Etienne sits out and the freshman running back just goes ham. But I think a lot of that sometimes gets overlooked by the way that Georgia was able to dominate the line of scrimmage offensively and defensively. Like they just wore Clemson down, and it's still Clemson. Like I was blown away by the defensive line, the defensive front four, being able to get pressure with only sending four on multiple occasions, getting off the field on third down. Like I don't have the exact numbers for third down conversions, but like it just seemed like they were in the backfield without sending extra rushers, being able to drop 7 and make. I mean, obviously the passing numbers kind of reflect that, but just the ability to control the line of scrimmage and not even get into like the skill set players. The skill set players seem to be on such a different level. I don't want to say than the entire country, but it was on full display yesterday. And so I think the line of scrimmage got overlooked a little bit, but I would say that's what won the game. I mean, they just dominated them. And definitely in the second half, it was like law of attrition. We get into the second half and like Georgia sped up and Clemson slowed down.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not only do we have maybe the best front seven in the country and the best offensive line in the country, but it's the depth across the board. And so I think that's why these recruiting rankings, when you're stacking top threes on top of each other 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
And then of course you're able to fill in some holes with transfers, which Dabo refuses to do, which we'll get into.
Yeah, Clemson not so much. Clemson
not so much. And so it's just that depth of talent, is incredible. And like we're just able to roll guys in. Michael Williams, as kind of a dirty play from Mufa on that pickup, and then Jalen Walker comes in. Who's a 4-star, 5-star type of guy and makes like back-to-back plays like on the next 2 possessions. And you just have like depth across the board. And so you're right, in the second half, in a physical game, that attrition sort of adds up. And so there just aren't that many programs in the country that can match our frontline talent. But then when you throw in all the backups and it's just going to wear a lot of teams down in the second half, I think.
Yeah, what is and excuse me for not knowing this. I should have looked it up this morning. But ETN, is he going to be the starting running back? And how many games is he? Is it a suspension?
Yeah, it was a suspension for a driving incident over the course
Georgia
of the summer.
And the driving incidents. Come on, man. We got to reel that back in a little bit.
We do. But anyway, so I think it was originally a DUI and it was pled down. So I think technically what he pled to, Kirby could have played him because it did not violate, whatever the standard is for team rules for a suspension. And I think Kirby has been non-disclosive about how long the suspension will be. So I don't know if he's going to be back. I think
How about the true freshman?
Yeah. I think I have Texas Tech coming up next. So if Kirby really wanted to send a message, he could sit him one more and then maybe bring him back for the Kentucky game in week 3. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I going into the game, I assumed that Branson Robinson was going to be our lead back. But it's pretty clear, after the first couple of carries that Nate just had, more burst.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Branson will regain form a bit as the year goes on, coming back from a bad injury. But Nate, he has that explosiveness that just jumps off the screen. Watching it from home. And so combined with that big offensive line, I mean, he's going to do a lot of damage. And we know Etienne has that same sort of burst and speed. So it's going to be an interesting, I think, running back combination if the two of those guys can stay healthy all year.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that we're talking about just a shellacking against Clemson, which like you said, traditionally top 5 program over the last decade, 14th in the country, and we haven't mentioned or not talking about a difference maker in Carson Beck, who could be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft at quarterback. Like that's how dominant Georgia is.
Yeah, and Beck, he had a very, very solid game.
I mean, the numbers were good, but he wasn't really asked or required to do much.
No, and I think it's going to be hard for him to win the Heisman for that reason, and some of it is just we're going to be balanced, and we're just not going to, with our defense. Hopefully, we're not going to have to get into shootouts with people. And unfortunately, I think the Heisman is still weighted towards, stats as opposed to, people really thinking about the value somebody brings to a team. But, going into it, I was sort of writing down questions, and I was like, where are the explosives going to come from on offense? We've lost a lot of talent to the draft on offense. And of course, we are heavily reliant on Brock and McConkey and some of those guys who have left the program.
Yeah. I love Brock.
Yeah. And then the other question I had was like, when the game is tight, like who are we going to go to? And on the explosives question, I think the answer is a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean,
there's just so much speed everywhere. Speed kills in college. Speed.
I mean, we were getting the ball to Arian Smith, which we haven't done in a couple of years. That was nice. Obviously, Dylan Bell, before he cramped up, with the reverses and some explosives. Yeah. I mean, Nate Frazier clearly has some explosives in him. I think Etienne will. And then London Humphrey, the transfer from Vandy, obviously has some explosives in him too. So you kind of look around and then, the question is like, who's our go-to person? I think the go-to person is going to be Carson. And that, like, we're just going to put the ball in his hands and he's going to just spray the ball and make reads.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to force the ball to people. And I think it's going to make us very hard to cover because we're not going to show a bunch of tendencies. I was looking at how we distribute the ball. So it was 9 different players caught a pass on 23 completions.
Yeah.
And then we had 2 more players who were targeted. So we targeted 11 guys. And then we had 7 different players have a rushing attempt. And again, that was a little bit inflated because the game was over at the end. But still, I think what this team is going to be is very balanced on offense. You're going to have Carson, who is going to just take the matchups that we have in different games. And I think in certain games, we're just going to play to our strengths and sort of pick on the other team's weaknesses. And in this case, it's interesting. Like, we didn't really go to the tight ends a lot. There's 4 total tight end targets. We had 2 catches, both by Lucky. No catches for Delt. No catches for the Stanford transfer. But I think also, Clemson's got the number 1 linebacker in the country, right? And so they've got a good safety in Wiggins. And so I think there'll be other games where, like, the tight ends are going to catch 10 balls, 15 balls. And so we just probably liked our matchups a little bit better outside. And I think that's going to make us really tough to defend, is just our ability to spray the ball to a bunch of different people based on matchups.
Yeah, one of the things, I had this conversation with one of my buddies in Georgia yesterday. We were just talking kind of download, and he I think he enjoyed the game, so I don't know how much he'll remember that conversation. But what a luxury it's going to be, for Carson not to have to force the ball.
Yeah,
like you said, like the efficiency that he's set up to have. Now, who knows what's going to happen? And it's college football, anything can happen, and it's one game, so we're not getting ahead of ourselves, but just the ability to not have to go somewhere because you don't have options. Like, options seem to be all over the field. Now we're 1 game in, so we'll see. I don't think you're going to get much pushback from Tennessee Tech and Kentucky. I think you roll as well. Now, there will be a test in 3 weeks when you got Alabama, and I think that's a road game. I think you go to Alabama, but that's a lot of choices. I mean, it's hard to game plan for Georgia because there's speed everywhere. And like you said, I think there's going to be multiple games where maybe the defensive linebacking core is not as strong and the tight ends eat. You know what I mean? I mean, Kirby has shown a propensity to get the tight ends involved and get them involved heavily over the years. So I don't think there's a lack of packages that other teams have to prepare for, even if you don't see it on a given week.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much. I mean, we're going to be balanced between running and throwing, although I think we'll be a little bit more throw heavy this year with Beck.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we want to go into a game and sort of do the power running game, I think we've got that in our arsenal. We can load up with 2-3 tight ends if we want and do the play action game. We can spread people out. I think just based on the matchups, we're going to see a really different for offensive game plan. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But we were so efficient in the second half. I think once we got the nerves behind us and really kind of got it rolling. And I think that's hopefully the type of efficiency we'll see all year.
Yeah. Did you happen to catch any of? And again, I'm not downplaying Tennessee Tech or Kentucky, but I think a lot of people will circle that Alabama game for. All right, this is gonna dictate a lot. This is gonna be a heavily weighted game when things shake out for the playoff and for the bye. And anyone that's watching this and new to the college football format, I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around it. You win the SEC, you get that probably the first seed. You know, the SEC is going to be weighted the best conference in America. You win your conference, you get that bye 1 through 4. The ACC, I think, is going to end up being 4. People were talking about Notre Dame in a perfect position to get that 5 spot because they're not in a conference. 12 teams make it. But Alabama, obviously, I would say is the biggest test. I mean, Auburn's good too. There's a lot of it's the SEC, but Alabama traditionally, and they look great yesterday. Did you see any of it?
I did not see any of that game. Yeah, I pulled down our schedule and our win percentages, expected win percentages. So Clemson was an 82.3% expected win percentage, which is crazy, by the way.
That's nuts. That's nuts. But yeah,
Tennessee Tech 99%, no surprise there. So then at Kentucky 88%, at Bama, so we're expected to win at Bama 59%.
Okay.
Obviously,
I mean that's still pretty. I mean, like to be favored in Bama in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously going to be a fascinating game. Tons of storylines there with DeBoer taking over for Saban. I mean, you know, is it really going to be a passing of the torch and Kirby, you know, sort of clearly the owner of the SEC, or is DeBoer able to make a statement in that game at home? So that's just going to be so much fun. You know, we have Auburn at home 88%, Mississippi State at home 94%.
And here's the big one too.
At Texas, so 52%. So that's actually
Texas is loaded.
Lowest win percentage of the season, but still favored at Texas at this point. Florida 85% after yesterday. I assume that's going to go up.
They looked awful yesterday.
And then at Ole Miss, 78.8%, which is higher than I would have thought. Tennessee at home, 79%, higher than I thought. UMass, 99%. And then I didn't get a percentage on Tech, but so we'll see. Maybe Tech has a team this year after their win against Florida State. But you know, you look at Bama, you look at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, and then maybe Tennessee at home. And you know, I think we make the playoff with 2 losses, excuse me. So, but you know, ideally, you know, we would only drop, you know, we go undefeated, of course, or only drop one of those away games, Bama or Texas. And then, of course, we're in a very solid position. We'd be in the SEC championship game, and then you're playing for one of those 4 byes. And it's going to be really interesting now with this expanded playoff to see how much of those byes matter. You know, is it like the NFL playoffs, you know, where, you know, the teams that have to play in that first weekend end up getting stomped a lot just because of the attrition?
Yeah.
And I also think, you know, we were talking about depth. Given the longer playoff now, the teams that have been recruiting really well and have that depth, I think it's going to give them a huge advantage in this new playoff system.
For sure. And then also just the ability to, I mean, just like yesterday, to play guys less plays during games that are already decided. I mean, there's going to be several games where the starters play, you know, 40 plays less than usual. You know what I mean? That the law, like you said, the law of attrition. And that's true of anything. But Georgia seems to have it this year in spades. And I think it's going to end up being one of the advantages when it comes down the stretch to a longer playoff run this year.
Yeah, not only are you able to overcome injuries, but of course, like you said, just the wear and tear of plays throughout the season, and then being able to roll in, you know, a second D line or a second O line that's basically just as good is going to give, I think, Georgia and Ohio State and Bama, those teams that have been recruiting really at that level now for 4 or 5 years, a big advantage come playoff time.
Yeah, if you had to. And we're playing the hypothetical here, but it's always fun. Texas and Alabama. You think you drop both of those? Because I feel like that's a split for sure. I'd be more afraid of Texas than I would be Alabama. I know that sounds odd to say, but I just have a lot of respect for what Texas is doing, and I think that they've got a lot of depth as well. I'm not so sure about Alabama. I'm sure anybody that's watching this that loves Alabama will probably have some things to say about it. Endless amounts of respect for Alabama's program. The basketball program's really putting me off of Alabama though right now. So
I think we're more likely to win both than lose both.
I would agree, but if you were to guess, like let's say you were laying money on winning both, losing, who would you feel would be a tougher win of the two?
I kind of think Texas, in that I think we're going to be so hyper focused on that Bama game.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not that we're not going to be focused on Texas, but I just think that the way that rivalry has played out over the last couple of years, and I think the desire to just make a statement against DeBoer in his first season, I think we're more likely to win the Bama game.
I would agree. For some reason, probably a basketball bias, but I just feel like Texas is at this moment in time a tougher football program this season. We'll see. But man, what a way to start, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think talking about the talent, like I went back and pulled. I was just kind of curious, like what's the talent gap between Georgia and Clemson? And so I went back to the 2020, so the last 5 recruiting classes. And of course in 2020, you had, I forgot when Clemson last won the national championship. They basically were coming off a couple of national championships. They were making the playoff every year. Yeah. So it was like pretty close back then, right? So Georgia was number 1. We had 4 5-stars. Clemson was 3. They had 5 5-stars. But a lot of those guys are gone, right? You got Breezy and Trenton Simpson and some of those guys. But there's still a couple of those guys still on the team, Capehart, Pickens. 2021, Georgia was 4th. We had 4 5-stars. Clemson was 5th. They had 3. They still have Barrett Carter and Maffa was in that recruiting class. So going back to those years, like we were basically recruiting pretty much at parity. The last 3 years, so Georgia was 3rd. We had 5 5-stars. Clemson was 10th. They had 2. And then 2023, Georgia was 2nd, 5 5-stars. Clemson was 11th. They had 1. And then 2024, Georgia was 1st with 5 5-stars. Clemson was 11th again with 1. So if you go the last 3 years, Georgia has 15 5-stars to Clemson's 4. I mean, that's like a whole starting 11 of 5-stars.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the transfer portal, and Georgia's been supplementing, with guys like London Humphrey, guys like Dominic Lovick, Colby Young had a touchdown. And Clemson's had, they made the point on the broadcast yesterday, they've had 0 starts from transfers.
Yeah, I mean, Dabo's been pretty vocal about that. Now, again, that's either going to change or Dabo's going to face some pretty tough questions at the end of this season. Also, not that I'm a football guru, but in the research that I've done briefly, because the game was last night, and or yesterday morning, but people have been attacking the offensive play calling and the creativity that goes behind it. And Dabo has had a lot of success, but he had a lot of success with elite quarterback play. So, like, what can you do with a guy that's not a top 10 NFL draft pick at quarterback? And so you're not always going to have that. Dabo has struggled when he didn't. You got Deshaun Watson, who was one of the best college quarterbacks around. And then Trevor Lawrence, who I think that name speaks for itself. So then moving forward, okay, you're not always going to have that elite talent. How are you able to build around a guy? I mean, DJ Ungale just was not the answer, but like, was he that bad, or were you not able to win in different capacities? And Georgia's had great quarterback play, but they haven't had what Clemson had in that run. They were able to build and be successful in other ways on the football field. And like, football field, there's a lot of ways to win a football game. Having great quarterback play, I think, would be at the top of that list, but it ain't the only way.
Yeah, and Dabo's rationale for not bringing in transfers. Oh, well, the people in the transfer portal, aren't good enough to play here because we're
Right.
recruiting at
Yeah. Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
high level. And you're
We,
like, if I was a Clemson fan, I'm like, okay, but Georgia's recruiting at a higher level. They're bringing in transfers.
Mhm.
Alabama's recruiting at a higher level. They're bringing in transfers. Ohio State's recruiting at a higher level. They're bringing in transfers. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't, as a fan, when your coach is saying things that obviously just don't make sense. And then you say, well, yeah, but we have transfers who are winning the Heisman Trophy: Joe
Yeah.
Burrow,
Joe
right?
Burrow.
Caleb
Yeah.
Williams, Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray,
Mhm.
and playing significant roles throughout the landscape of college football. And so, if you're a Clemson fan, right, he took you to the heights. You feel great about that. But like you said, he
Mhm.
did it with generational college quarterbacks. And
Yeah.
now the recruiting's dropping off significantly. You're not supplementing that with transfers. And you got a coach, for whatever reason, who has dug his heels in on this issue. And seems like he just can't admit that he's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. They're going to continue to, I think, see a talent gap if they're unable to turn the recruiting around, and then change it. So I know it's a fascinating kind of departure of what's happened, I think, in the last 3 years between those programs. But that talent gap, I think, absolutely showed up on the field yesterday.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, 34-3. I guess that does tell the story, but you could make a case for it was worse than that.
It could have been, yeah, yeah.
Um. Well, you know who really does well in the portal is Appalachian State. So we'll see portal versus no portal next week for Clemson's home opener. I'm glad. Look, Clemson's a great program, and Dabo has proven to be a great coach, but the landscape of college athletics, not just football, is changing. So I think developing, being fluid, open to the portal, which is only one aspect, but it's a very large aspect of all college athletics, definitely college football, is something that Dabo's going to have to look. You're going to have to adjust, or you just find a new place to coach. Because I don't know how long Clemson's going to sit as. I mean, I can't remember when the last time they won the ACC. Did they win the ACC 2 years ago?
Yeah,
I
I
can't.
think so. Yeah, they've been winning. The ACC's been down enough that they've been okay. But Florida State seems to be, Georgia Tech game aside, in the ascendancy a little bit. We'll see what Miami
Miami
brings this year.
Miami looked tough. I mean, Florida, I don't know. I don't watch a ton of Florida, but Miami went in there and they took care of business.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how long. I don't know how long Napier makes it at Florida. Toughest schedule in the country. As a Georgia fan, I was really hoping he would limp along and make it through the
Right.
year.
I
I
don't
don't.
think so. I mean, they had locker room problems. There was a kid in the locker room going live saying "F this team" on Florida. Like they've got some issues that not only taking, you know, licking on the field, but I think there's some stuff going on behind the scenes there, and that's an assumption. But when there's guys still in their uniform in the locker room posting "F this team" and all this other stuff, I would imagine there's some things to be addressed there.
Yeah, I mean, to lose that badly at home in week one, we've had the whole offseason pointed towards this big game, with a
Mhm.
rival. I mean, that's not a good sign for where that program is or their level of preparation.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I do
and
think Miami's better than they've been
yeah,
in recent memory for sure. So I think Miami is gonna. You could say probably the front runner for the
yeah, I think
ACC championship
they're
right now.
probably the favorite. Yeah,
Yeah. So, but it's Florida
but
and it's the
but no
swamp.
Florida fan thinks that
Yeah.
they should
Right.
lose at home to anybody,
Right. Right.
by that score
I
of the
think
40.
Florida's home opener too. Like their record home openers has been pretty legit. I mean, Florida is a great program, but like to get to for that game to go down the way that it did and be so definitive, I think it says a lot about where that program is, and maybe some changes are coming.
Yeah, yeah. Um, And then, we have to talk about 40 straight regular season wins. I mean,
That's an absurd.
so
When I heard
yeah,
that, that's an absurd number.
so I think
Crazy.
that move is second now, I think, all time. But it's up there. And in this era of college football, I think it's especially impressive. So
You know what was more impressive? They pulled Kirby Smart aside, obviously interviewed him right
Post
after the
game.
game. He's
Yeah.
post game. Yeah. And they brought up that stat, like, what comes to mind? How do you, how do you quantify, or how do you feel about winning 40 regular season games in a row? And he said something like, win the next one. Like
On to the next one.
Yeah, it was the best. Yeah, he was like, yeah,
he didn't skip a
that's
beat.
great.
He didn't skip
Yeah.
a beat.
I was like, okay, all right.
I
Yeah, he's like,
love
yeah.
I love Kirby's post game. Kirby said, we're going to out physical, we're out hustle, we're going to out discipline them.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. It's like such basic fundamental football. But yeah, we totally did. Like in the rushing stats, 169 to 46, like just no turnovers. We did have 7 penalties for 70 yards, but I think a couple of those were probably questionable calls, like pass interference calls and stuff like that.
Well, the pass interference call led to the field goal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Otherwise,
Like,
it's a shutout. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a shutout. Again, in context, and same thing. Watching the Notre Dame game yesterday as well, like penalties, and it's week 1. I think teams will get that underhand, but like if Clemson doesn't get that pass interference call, they don't score in the game, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. I also love that he was talking up Cash Jones when she asked him about Nate Frazier.
Yeah.
Remind me of Dean a little bit. Dean doesn't really want to talk about freshmen, or didn't really want to talk about freshmen. And but yeah, he's like, Cash Jones came in, he had a big
block.
Blitz pickup.
Blitz pickup, big block. Yep.
And yeah, I think Kirby's focus is on those fundamentals and doing the little things and people playing their role, and football more so than other sports. Like that's how you win. I mean,
For sure.
that's how it's the execution, it's the discipline, it's the physicality, and he's brought that culture to Georgia. And as a fan, it's just so much fun to watch. I mean, the winning's great too, but the way he does it and the way the team plays, to me, there's no better brand of football in college right now than our brand. I mean, as a fan, it's what I want to watch. So love Kirby.
Yeah. I mean, I think in any sport, definitely college football, because there's so many moving pieces on the field, getting guys to do the things that don't show up in the box score, again, in any sport, is how you win. And just like he said, picking up blitzes and stuff, no one's going to be writing articles about how well, the kid picks up a blitz. But to do that, you need guys that are willing to do that. And it seems as if Georgia's team over the last few years, and maybe moving forward, they've gotten guys to buy in. So I think Georgia's in a good place. They looked great week 1. I don't have much concern about week 2, but we'll come on here and recap it. And, maybe we'll get a better grip on the landscape of college football, and we'll kind of broaden it out a little bit, give our thoughts on some of the top teams and who looks good. I'm looking forward to seeing the LSU game a little bit later. It is a long weekend. I don't know if you're working tomorrow. Are you able to chill today? Like, are you off tomorrow? Because I know you're a hard worker. Hard to lock you down.
Taking tomorrow off, at least most of the day. So yeah, I'm gonna try to definitely catch that USC LSU game. I think it'll be interesting just to see what LSU looks like without Jaden Daniels. And then can USC find a defense? It's
out here in LA. That's a conversation that's had everywhere. Well, hopefully we'll play defense this year. I'm like,
and then what do they look like without Caleb Williams too? So I think there'll be a lot to be learned over the next couple of weeks. So it'll be fun to talk about. The Tennessee Tech game. There may not be too much to offer, although we should get a look. I think at the depth and sort of see how some of the younger guys perform. So it should be interesting. Speaking of which, I like KJ Bolden flash yesterday, which was great to see. I mean, both he and Nate Frazier, as true freshmen, had really big games. So great to see those high recruits getting in and having an impact in week 1.
Yeah, one thing that I'll look forward to, and I'll try to pay attention more, because I'm learning every time I watch a football game. I try to learn something, is the different packages that we'll see next week. I think that we'll obviously see some experimentation when the game is a little out of hand. And again, you never want to overlook anyone. Kirby's not overlooking anybody, but I do think that we'll see some different formation. I think we'll see some different personnel. I think we'll see other guys step up. And I think we'll get a better glimpse into what Georgia can go to when there's 6 weeks of tape on them. You know what I mean? Like there's things that they can say, okay, well, let's go to this formation. We ran it in the Tennessee Tech game, had some success with it. Let's see how it works against Ole Miss. You know what I mean?
Should be fun, man. I'm excited for the season and happy to be doing this with you.
Yeah, for my dogs. This is for all my dogs out there. And again, it's a working title. We'll get on it. It is college football. We are back week 1. All the good guys won in week 1. Like Carolina wins, App State wins, Georgia wins. I'm a happy camper, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure the Heels have much this year, but
hey,
we'll see.
I'm gonna enjoy this week until next week. You know what I mean?
All right, see you, brother.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.